Mr. Pond
Here we go.
Boss, tell me what
Going
to
live.
do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk checking in from somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. Actually, I'm not in the middle of nowhere. I'm in Conway, Arkansas today, hanging out at the Holiday Inn Express. So, hoping some folks will join me. I mean, I skipped last week. You had something kind of pretty cool going on last week. I'll tell you all about that here in a minute. And I'm just kind of hoping that I've got a good enough internet connection here to be able to see what everybody's got going. So, Wednesday, I've had a wild last couple of weeks. It's really been fun. And I'm going to tell you guys about it. Hi, Steven Stupa. Now, here I am at this Holiday Inn Express in Conway, Arkansas, headed to Pawhuska, Oklahoma tomorrow to give a speech at Allen Feed Store. I heard that's where the Pioneer Woman lives. And now I'm trying to find my feed here on my laptop so I can see your comments. Donna Pierce, John Funk, good to see John. Checking in, there's Michael Gray. Michael, I went to your store today. I think I woke up at 4:30 this morning and my eyes are all wide open. I'm thinking, man, I got so much to do. I need to get up and get at it. So I spent about 3 hours working on the next issue of Palm Boss. Speaking of which, I'm a little bit upset with our printer. Oh, there it is. Now I see this video. There it is. Now I can see your questions and stuff. So anyway, we got a call. So our last issue of Palm Boss, I guess it was the March-April issue, was late because of me. And so there's Frank James. Hey, Frank. Kenny Sanderson, Kansas. Frank James, Louisiana. Danny Mack, San Antonio. I noticed that Danny Mack caught up on his Facebook stuff today. He must have been gone a little bit. But anyway, we got a call from the printer. So anyway, the March-April was late, and that was my fault. Well, we got everything ready to go for the May-June issue of the magazine. Got it there plenty of time. Didn't hear anything from them. So I said, Leanne, you ought to give them a call and see what's going on. So she rang their number, and all they had was excuses. And it pretty well fits in with everything else that's going on now. Well, we got staffing issues. We had a hard time getting paper, so we're running late. And so they didn't even print it until about 10 days ago and sent it out about 5 or 6 days ago. So once again, we're late. Responsibility sits on my shoulders, although I don't want it to. I want to blame the printer. It was their fault, but my deal. But anyway, it's in the mail stream now. It looks pretty good, so I'm kind of excited about that. My gosh, have I got some stuff to tell you guys. Hey, Frank James has got it going. He knows the deal. Hashtag Palm Boss Magazine in the comments section. Click like or that little heart thing, however that works. That little we love you Palm Boss deal. And you will be eligible for, and share it to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a real live, well, sort of live, Palm Boss hat. And whatever else Leanne's got. I think she's got some books and coffee mugs and things. So anyway, if you do that, I think we'll have a drawing next time. Now, you guys all know the drill as well. Palm Boss Magazine, $35 a year. Listen to me, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year, and there's a nugget or two for you in every issue of the magazine. So I can't wait to tell you what's been going on. Kenny Sanderson, you're going to be really interested in this one, because I know how much of a fish head you are. Kenny's such a stud. That guy is growing smallmouth bass, and he's working on fathead minnows, and he's got all kinds of stuff going on there in Kansas. And that guy, I'm telling you, that guy, he lives it, eats it, and breathes it, although he's got a full-time job. I'm in a dry county, so it's Diet Dr. Pepper today. Which I think they are, I don't know. So, let me tell you what happened last week. Last Wednesday, I couldn't broadcast because I was driving to a remote hill country ranch southwest of Johnson City, Texas, where there was no cell service, no internet, and I went to the Sela Bamberger Ranch to spend 2 days with Texas A&M Range, Wildlife, and Fisheries Management students. That they volunteered to go to a 2-week camp, so they finished their semester, took their finals, and went straight to camp. And at that camp, They got to listen to some different speakers, but better than that, they got to do some hands-on cool stuff. So they tagged lizards with radio tags and followed them around. They did a controlled burn. They did some wildlife identification and studies, and they got to do some policy stuff. So my part, as you can imagine, was pond management. And they put me down for the last 2 days of camp on Thursday and Friday. So what I figured was that by the time I got there, they'd all be ready to go home. That's kind of what I figured. And there was only one fisheries major out of the 19 kids that were there. But I'm going to tell you something. I've got to brag about these kids, these young men and women. And there was just as many girls as there was boys, which I love that. And they were so enthusiastic, although they were cautiously enthusiastic, because I guess they were mostly juniors going into their senior year. And my job was to give them the principles of pond management and then get them out in the field and let them do some work. So I borrowed an electrofishing boat, took it down there, set them up with water chemistry sampling. We tested water. We checked the water clarity. There was a seine, but there wasn't any way to seine that lake. There was too much vegetation in it. So they had to identify aquatic plants. They got to listen to what you guys have heard for years and years and years. Happy water, habitat. Oh, I can hear y'all half of y'all are saying it with me. Habitat, food chain, genetics, and harvest. So I took them through those 5 fundamentals and then started teaching them how all those tie together in a nice bow to help them assess this ecosystem. There's about a 4 or 5 acre lake there on the ranch. The crystal clear water, overcrowded bass. You can stand on the bank, and still to this day, you can stand on the bank and then watch those little 12-inch dinks, skinny little dinks, flying out of the water chasing dragonflies, because the entire bottom of this lake is clear all the way down to 12 or 13 feet, and there's a layer of Cara, skunk grass, growing across the bottom. So what they were already divided up into teams. I think there were teams of 4 with one team of 3. And so their mission was, hey, here's an electrofishing boat, go use it. Here's a fight net, figure out how that works. We didn't use it, but figure out how it works. Let's do some water chemistry. Let's evaluate the water clarity. Let's figure out what kinds of plants there are. And then, based on those 5 principles, come up with a game plan as to what you would tell this landowner to do. So it's really, really fun watching them figure all this out. Of course, there's those that were really anxious to get in there and get involved. There was one girl that wanted to push me out of my seat so she could drive the sharker boat. And I wasn't going to get in the electrofishing boat, but I could tell they were struggling a little bit. So I ended up getting in the boat and driving it some and trading off. And anyway, it was great fun. And I'm going to tell you something. Being around those kids for basically 2 days renews my faith in our young people. Those kids, young adults, young men and women are leaders. They're thirsty for knowledge. They know who they are. They're not having to guess who they are. They know who they are. And, I hate turning on the news because you just don't know what crap you're going to hear next. Well, these kids, I'm going to tell you, there's hope. And I'm thrilled to death. And it was really fun. And I got to spend the director of the brand new department head, Roel Lopez, Dr. Lopez came. And I got to hang out with him, and we told stories and, shared an adult beverage and just got to just enjoy those kids. And, after the kids did what they did, then we go to our intern house, and that's where we hung out, what they call the intern house on that ranch. So it was great, great fun. And then after that, hoofed it over to Jonathan and Kat, my son and daughter-in-law's Running River Ranch, spent the night there, and then I headed up to look at a lake site where I'm designing this brand new 8-acre lake near Teague, Texas. Then I shot over to look at Freeman Sawyer's Heroes Ranch. Look up heroesranch.org. He's doing something significant, something cool. He just bought some more property adjacent to his ranch, and he wanted to look at a pond to see if we could enlarge it. So I popped over there, and then I ended up going over to do something really cool. Now I want to tell you about this. So you guys be sure if you got questions, bring them to me. Let's see, Troy, Todd, Frank, James. Okay, let me see here. Let me scroll down, make sure I'm not missing anything. Justin Lugwood, I remember when Kenny first started posting on the forum. There you go, Kenny. You got fans, buddy. Kim Moore from Central Illinois, renewing her subscription. Sweet. Way to go. Hands-on is the best thing. And you know what? And they had some hands-on. They got to weigh and measure fish. They pulled up skunk grass. They drug it out with the rakes. You know, they actually went fishing. I had them do some sampling by angling and to compare that data to the data we got from the electrofishing boat. And then when we came back, we took all that data and compiled it into a spreadsheet so they could see the significance of it, so they could understand how we do what we do statistically to evaluate a fishery. It's easy to go out there and look at these fish and say, yeah, this is it and this is that. These are too big, too fat, too skinny. These need to go, these need to stay. You know, but when you get to see it real world, it was great. And every one of those kids, all 19 of them, were soaking wet by the time we pulled that boat out of the water. It was great. James Allen, we had 17 largemouth bass scoring 102, but 14 inches, 86. Vast majority is around 14 inches, but haven't been weighed. Sounds like time to eat some 14 inches. I would say that's right. Look at there. There's Leah Groons with Scott Gig'em from Beggs, Oklahoma. Hey, I'm going to be in Pawhuska, Oklahoma tomorrow at 1:30 at Allen Feeds giving a speech, which will be fun. And so then what I did afterwards, let's see, what's today? Today's got to be Wednesday because I'm doing this. So Monday, I haven't been home. I know that. I've not been home. I haven't seen my house since I left last Tuesday a week ago. I think Debbie's got it handled. I don't know. Well, she says she does, and I believe her. So anyway, then had gotten a call from Robert Chandler in Memphis, Tennessee. I've worked with Robert on a few consulting jobs before. He's got a bunch of friends that love to hunt and fish, and he's connected me up with a few consultation gigs. And he called me and he says, hey, there's a group over here, a fishing club, south of Memphis on the river, so in a lake adjacent to the Mississippi River. And they got this really cool crappie lake, and they're not sure if it's thriving or if it's cyclical or what's going on with it. And they'd like for you to come. And I said, I don't have time, man. I'm booked. I've got to finish writing Pond Boss. You know, I'm getting ready to go to Pennsylvania to spend time with Drew Hay, you know, on a road trip. I've got this camp coming up, so I don't have time. He said, well, we'll pay you. And I said, yeah, well, I shot him a number. He said, okay. And I go, God dang, I should have. Well, I'm so glad I came. So I headed over Sunday, I guess it was. Yeah, I spent the night in a hotel somewhere Sunday, and then Monday morning headed up to Hughes, Arkansas, to Porter Lake, which is just almost butted up to Horseshoe Lake, which is a big oxbow off the Mississippi River. So there's a 500-acre lake there that's a crappie lake, and it's a pretty cool lake. If you want to look at it on Google Earth, it's called Porter Lake. It's just south of Horseshoe Lake, south of Memphis, Tennessee. So if you look at that lake, it's pretty much round with an island in it, kind of like a donut shape. And there's absolutely no structure in it except peripheral. There's Phragmites, which is an invasive plant that looks like Johnson grass. There's a little bit of bushy pondweed here and there, but not much, and some big, beautiful cypress trees, because that lake's been around for eons. It's got to be set off. I think they built a levee to raise the level of it, but it's segregated from the big oxbow lake. And so it's a private fishing club, and this is the first time anybody's asked me to help them figure out how to manage crappie. So I thought, you know, let's like to tackle that. I think that would be fun. And so we brought the electrofishing boat over, which was a little bit of a chore. There's always something going on, something wrong, something happening, some obstacle. And you know, Justin Stain, he had some obstacles to overcome to get that boat down here. But he did, and we started shocking. I also got to go fishing with one of the members. And so here's what we found with the electrofishing boat. So the goal is to get as many big crappie in this 500 lake as they can. That's a sustainable, catchable population of fish. Now, when somebody calls me and says, I want crappie, they're not talking about the business end of a fishing pole like that and their cheeks are all puffed out. They're thinking about, I want something we can fillet and eat. And the club rules that they can catch 15 per boat per day. and there's something like 40 or 50 active members. So the mission was to go see what's the status of the fishery, what's competing with them, how they're thriving, and what can be done to make them better. So what we did was as we went fishing, I observed the fish being caught. And there were 2 boats out there, and the boat we weren't in was a grandfather. They call him Papa, same as my kids, they call me. And he had twin 10-year-old grandsons in his boat with him. And they were drift fishing with these jigger poles with crappie minnows on 2 different hooks, just drifting across the main body of the lake with a weight at the bottom and the minnows above, like 12 inches apart. So they're drifting across with the weight about a foot off the bottom. So they're fishing in the top bottom 2 to 3 feet of this lake that's typically pretty shallow, 5 to 6 feet deep in most places. There's a little bit of deep water. So they were fishing in the open water, drifting across it, catching crappie. And they were catching crappie. Both boats caught their limit. Well, as I was looking, they also caught some other fish. One of them said, "Oh, I caught a striper." I thought, no, there's no stripers in that lake. If there were stripers in that lake, they would have been talking about that a long time ago, because they'd be 8, 10, 12 pounds in a lake that big. Well, they were catching a fish. Y'all look this fish up. None of them knew what it was, not even Justin. I stumped them all. Well, the fish stumped them. I didn't. They're yellow bass. I've seen yellow bass on occasions where rivers interact with a lake, like in East Texas, and this is a classic example. So here's the species we shocked up today. So I'm going to throw a little puzzle out there. Then I'm going to tell you what we did. So as we're shocking, we've got 2 extra guys, 2 guys netting, 2 guys down in the bottom of the boat with these 60-gallon trash cans, bigger than a 55-gallon barrel. So when they were picking up buffalo that weighed anywhere from 5 pounds to 20 pounds, common carp, drum, freshwater drum. They caught a bunch of those that were, say, 1 pound to 2 pounds maybe. Needle-nosed gar. They were capturing, see, what other trash fish were they? Oh, they were throwing channel cat away. They picked up 3 or 4 channel cat and put those in the trash can. But we took out today, and I left about 1:30. We took out about, I'm going to tell you, when I left, there was probably 400 or 500 pounds of trash fish. And we were putting them in a trash can, then they'd pour them in the bucket of a skid steer, and then go put them in a dump trailer. And when I left, they were going to keep shocking until dark, and I presume they did. And so I know they were going to catch a whole bunch. Kendall Brown, good to see you, buddy. Philip Benefield, I know the importance of structure. How does one go about picking the right spot to place structure? That's a good question. I'll come to that. I'm going to stay on this topic just for another minute. So we found yellow bass. We found white crappie. No black crappie. That doesn't mean they're not there. It just means we didn't find any. Channel catfish, largemouth bass. We found bluegills. We found one little nest, one little bed of red ears, shellcrackers that were about 11 inches long and just chunky as they could be. They spectacular fish. They weighed 1.25 pounds. You know, they weren't as big as they get, but they were big enough that they were significant. And then we found silver sides minnows. We found 5 huge schools of 1/2-inch long baby gizzard shad. And on the live scope, the Bobby that I was with there in his boat, he kept seeing what he thought were bubbles in the water on his live scope. And then when he saw those schools of baby shad today, he said, that's what I'm seeing on my live scope. So he was able to make that connection between what he thought was bubbles in the water as baby gizzard shad. So we saw golden shiners. We saw big gizzard shad. So we saw all these different species of fish, and the majority of the trash fish were hanging around in the Phragmites, or right at the edge, as were the bass and bluegill. Most of the crappie were not. They were offshore a little bit, as you would expect them to be this time of year. So now, here's the question. How can we figure out what's going on with that crappie population and make it better? So I'll tell you that here in a minute, what I'm thinking about. All right, so Philip Benefield, I know the importance of structure. How does one go about picking the right? I tell you what I tell people to do. I tell people to map the bottom of their lake. Use that side scan sonar. Figure out how to match up GPS with the depths and plot those on a Google Earth map. Create contours of the bottom of your lake. So if you can figure out how to create a bathymetry map for your lake, even if you do it with a weight on the end of a string, plot those depths on your map and create contour lines. And then study those contour lines and see where you catch the most fish. Now, I bet you there's going to be a correlation between where you catch the most fish and the contour of the bottom of that pond or that lake. So what you're looking for is underwater points, humps, drop-offs, something that's a defining structure like a creek channel. And once you can see those places on your map and you know that you've caught fish in that area before, I give those a grade. Now, first thing when I look at a bathymetry map of a lake, I'm looking at places where the lines are tight, there's a drop-off adjacent to a flat, something like that. I give those areas a grade of an A. And then when there's areas that are sweeping, shallow, maybe kind of a flat area with nothing differentiating it, I grade those as a B. And when there's places where I know there's no fish ever going to hang out, they might pass through, but they ain't hanging out, I'm going to give them a C. So I'm looking for differentiation in contour. I'm looking for some underwater flats with that sharp drop-off next to it. And those are the areas that I want to enhance first. I think you need to take the best places you've got and enhance those first. If you can do that, then you're going to attract more fish. So do your A spots first, then do your B spots. And if you still got the want to and the dollars and the time, then start working on some of your C spots. So that's the way I look at it. Let's see there. There's Steve Lewis. Yeah, man, I have been busy. Well, you know what? I may ring you tomorrow as I'm driving if you're around. I know you got my number. I'll be driving from 8 o'clock until about 11. If you got time to talk, ring me. Dennis Smith, I got a bunch of curly leaf pondweed spreading in our campground 4.25 acre pond. What should I treat it with that won't harm the lily pads? Okay, that's a good question. I would go to Aquaplant. That's where I want to drive everybody. That is the most up-to-date aquatic plant knowledge base, database, information base online. And you get good information there. Go to Aquaplant, and it's got a search feature in it. Put in curly leaf pondweed, and it's going to show you your options. And most, I'll tell you this, whatever herbicides you choose to use won't harm the lily pads. There's not much you can use that will harm lily pads. Let's see what Frank is saying here. Another habitat question. Is it smart to place artificial structure where feeders throw the pellets, or it would be better off to the side? Do it off to the side. If you put it right in front of the feeder, then it spooks the habitat. So I would put that structure off to the side. If you got a Texas Hunter feeder that throws feed in a straight line, it throws it in a cone. Move off out of that cone and set those things up. Hello, Ken Dowd. Chris Couch, new magazine subscriber from Yukon, Oklahoma. Good deal. Thanks for sharing your wealth of knowledge. Happy to do it. Yep, help you any way we can, brother. Sonny Mitchell here in Central Alabama. Love your show. Fishing in our 5 acre pond right now while listening. Have a question for you. We just restocked threadfin shad in this pond, and we're wondering what they're doing. Uh-oh, I just lost it. Okay, hold on. When they jump on the surface. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? I love when I don't know what the internet connections are going to do. Just love it. Just love it. So going back to Sonny Mitchell's question, what they're doing when they jump, when they're first released off the truck, they will flutter, they will flush, and they'll jump. They're going to jump all over this. They're doing a couple of things. First of all, they're shaking off the after effects of being cooped up and being anesthetized to some. They're also trying to get rid of excess oxygen, because when they haul those threadfin shad, they're giving them a lot of oxygen in the water to keep them alive. So they end up they don't really get the bends, but they want to shake off some of that excess oxygen that they've got. But it's just, now that when they're coming to the surface like that, that's not normal behavior. That's behavior of fish that have just been transported. So once they get out there and they get used to your lake and they start filter feeding, like you mentioned here in your question, then you can start seeing them moving around in school sometimes in the afternoon. You know, they'll even come to fish food sometimes. So that's kind of the way that works. Let's see what else we got here. I'm going to look on my phone because my laptop ain't working too good. There's Dustin from Pristine Pond Solutions. Mike Cottrell, I didn't see you earlier. Ian Swinger, Danny Mack, we saw Danny. Fred Bingaman, good to see Fred Bingaman from Brownstown, Illinois. Sharmus Blake, good to see Sharmus. Doug Cusick, James Allen from Kentucky. Vito, I heard you got a new job. Didn't mean to invite you. Sorry. Hola. Ah, dang it. Here we go. I'm messing up here. I'm trying to go on my phone to see my questions because I'm not seeing them here on my laptop because this inconsistent deadgum internet here. There's Mike Augustine. Good to see him. Chuck Anzalone. Justin Ludwig. Yep. Okay, so I'm way behind here. Holy cow. Let me catch up. William Elmers. Oh, man. I'm way behind. I'm going to scroll through here and see what we got because I'm not seeing it on my laptop. Ken Dowd. Okay, let me see. There's Frank. Chuck Brinkman. There's Elena and Miranda. Good to see you, girls. Ken Dowd. William Wheeler. Chris Couch. Yep, okay, saw that a while ago. Sonny Mitchell, we did that, so now I'm catching up. So let's see here. Randy Warren. I see a bunch of new folks. Well, Linda Welch. Russell Braswell. Todd Austin. Kenny Sanderson. You know, Kenny, I don't know why you and I think along the same lines, but I got the A spot, B spot, C spot. I'm kind of leaving it right there on those maps. Wesley Ellis. Yep. Trey Carpenter. Good to see Trey. Yep. I'm getting lots of waiting for signal. Now, you know what? I don't know why. I'm hanging out at this dadgum Holiday Inn, and they have got like 8 different internet connections. And when I first got here, I started trying to connect on every one of them, thinking one of them would be good. But they all look like they fade in and out. And I don't know what to do about that. So it's a little aggravating. And I know it's more aggravating to you because you're trying to watch this and I'm trying to produce it. Hey, there's R.E. Thompson. Good deal. Kevin Matney. So R.E. Thompson got out. He wasn't, when he says he got out, that don't mean he got out of jail. It means he got out of church. So anyway, let's go back to the crappie deal. So we weighed and measured a bunch of crappie, and they're weighing and measuring more right now. Justin's going to send me the data. And there was basically 2 size classes. There were those that were about 10 to 13 inches long, that weighed anywhere from a pound to a pound and a quarter, maybe a little bit more. Holy cow, I'm seeing more stuff happening here. I'm going to come back to your questions in a minute. I see them. Oh, look at there. There's Jared Poole. Hey, I got to spend time with Jared Poole, Hill Country Hammer Guys and Outfitters. They've started their podcast thing, and I got to sit in with those guys. And you know what? Hey Jared, when you load up that podcast, be sure and share it on the Palm Boss Facebook page so people can watch it, because that was a really, really fun podcast because those guys chase giant bass in the springtime. And Jared put 31 double-digit bass in his boat with clients this spring. And so his approach is really intriguing to listen. So what we were doing is we were talking about angling techniques compared to biology and how all those things mix. So when that podcast comes up, be sure and connect us up there, Jared. And you guys, if you want to go fishing, you need to go holler at Hill Country Hammer, see what they got going on. All right, so I want to talk more about this crappie stuff here in just a second. Let's see. Ken Dowd, I see what you got going on. I can't look at it on my laptop, so I'm playing with my phone to look at it. All right, so you got spring, summer filament algae bloom on a 2-acre pond near Gettysburg. Any suggestions on how to lower the nutrient phosphorus levels without spending crazy amounts of money? You know what? Go ahead and look up Foslock. Check out Foslock, because that's a pretty good way to do things, and you can do it yourself. And with a 2-acre pond, it's not that expensive. It's going to cost, but if you don't get rid of the excess phosphorus in that part of the country, it's going to cost you anyway in ways you won't like. So I would tell you to look at Foslock. Get in touch with Matt Rail. He's on Facebook. He's got the private, oh gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I can't think of the name of it, but he's got a really active Facebook page for pond management, and he knows how to do that. David Kent, R.E. Thompson, how do you determine the sex of bass? Well, ask Kenny about their G-spot. No, he didn't really say that. You spread their fins and look. Actually, right now, it's really not easy to do. In the springtime, it's easy because the females have eggs and the males have milk. And you can look at the belly of a female bass in the spring, and you can see how it's bilaterally symmetrical. If you look at the belly, because there's 2 ovaries and they're the same size. But this time of year, it's not easy to tell. Even the pros really don't know how to do it. So, looky there. So it's really hard to tell the sex of a bass. I do want to go back and talk about this crappie stuff. So we weighed and measured them. We found 2 size classes. We found no babies, no young of the year crappie at all. So either they didn't spawn or they had an unsuccessful spawn. And some of the old timers there were telling me stories about this year where with back-to-back cold fronts coming at the end of each week for 5 weeks, that they were catching crappie at the beginning of the week, post-front, moving up, staging in shallow water to spawn, and then the front blows through and they wouldn't catch them anymore. They'd move out to deeper water. So it looks like these crappie did not reproduce in that 500-acre lake this year. Either that, if they did, their survival rates are low. So there's 2 size classes. So as I got to thinking about it, I thought, it really would be beneficial because some of these crappie are plenty big to eat. Those 12, 13 inches, so a few 14s, not many, but they were thick-shouldered. Bellies were a little bit lean, but they're thick-shouldered. A lot of fillet on those fish. So I thought, you know what? If we could age these fish, if we could figure out how old they are, then we could start plotting some strategies on what to do about it, because there's two key things about crappie populations. First of all, they're cyclical. They're cyclical because those fish are unpredictable spawners. They spawn first every year when they spawn, but if they don't have conditions that are perfect, those females are just going to absorb their eggs, and they're not going to lay the eggs. So if you go 2 or 3 years without a year class, without fish coming up the pipeline, then the other fish are either going to be caught out or age out, and then you're going to have some gaps. And that crappie are notorious for that. So trying to manage crappie, you're going to have to manage the gaps, which means you've got to artificially prop up the lack of recruitment by stocking some fish, which in this case, in this lake might not be a bad thing. It won't cost them a lot of money. I mean, if they stock 10 or 12 crappie per acre each year, if they don't spawn, then they've got control over the numbers. If they got control over the numbers, they can also have control over the growth rates. Now, another thing about crappie is they have harvest limits of 15 fish per boat per day. Now, the membership numbers are going up because there are more memberships being sold, which is an interesting thing because one family holds the majority of the memberships, and if they need a little bit of money, they'll sell memberships, and that's how they'll generate revenue, regardless of how big they want the club to be. So harvest is going to end up being an issue, and a lot of times under harvest on crappie is a problem. I can see in this lake where over harvest can be a problem because they've got 40 active members, and out of those 40 active ones, there's 6 or 7 that are really, really, really chasing meat. And so one thing we're going to have to do is look at relative weights. As a matter of fact, before the show started, I was working on a spreadsheet, and I know nothing about Excel spreadsheets. If any of you do, coach me through this, because I'm trying to create XY graphs for standard weights and lengths of crappie, and I do not know how to do it. And I'll sit up here till frickin' midnight trying to figure that out. But on the crappie thing, I want them to manage or monitor lengths and weights of those crappie. And if they do that over the long haul, like every time they catch some, and they're going to go home and clean them, then get me lengths and weights. And if you get those lengths and weights, we'll plug them into this formula, and then we can start to see if they're gaining weight or if they're losing weight. And over a 2 or 3 year period, we can monitor that and see how that population is changing and see how harvesting is impacting that. Then we can make different recommendations on how many fish they should take. Should they harvest more? James Allen, man, I'm in. Let's have a conversation. I think I've got your phone number. Matter of fact, I almost know I do. If I don't, text or message, I'll message you here in a little bit because I'm trying to figure this out. So anyway, so trying to get some. Justin, YouTube is the best Excel teacher. Why didn't I think of that? I'd rather talk to James Allen. But I heed your advice. Maybe what I end up doing anyway, because I'm a little bit dense on stuff like this. So here's what our game plan is. We want to find out how old the crappie are. Well, you can't rely on scales. So I called my good friend up at upstate New York, Mark Carnwell, the fish professor that writes for each issue of Pond Boss. Said, hey, Mark, I got a little question for you. If I can get some anglers to pull the otoliths out of the heads of some crappie, do you have some students that could help age these crappie? He says, oh, you don't even need to pull them out. He says, have those guys, when they fillet some crappie, just take the head and take one piece of the skin. They cut the fillet off, freeze that in a Ziploc bag, take a Sharpie, put the length and weight of that fish on the bag and freeze it. And when they've got about 30, send them to me. I'll get the students to pull the otoliths. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to have them start saving some fish that they catch and send the heads and some scales up to SUNY Cobleskill and let the fish professor and his students age these fish. Then we'll start getting some age profiles. Because if we find out that those 11, 12, 13-inch crappie are 6 years old, we're going to go in one direction. If they're 3 years old, we're going to go into another direction. So now the other aspect is they're competing. They're competing against largemouth bass. But here's the thing. You guys have heard this talk over and over and over. As goes the habitat, so goes what lives in it. There's largemouth bass habitat. So I'm not going to be that guy that says you need to put a lot more structure in that lake so you can attract the crappie and make them easier to catch. I'm not going to do that because I know what will happen. Those bass will come offshore. They get right out in the middle of that crappie habitat, and pretty soon they're going to start getting more bass, and they don't want that. They want enough bass that can help control over-reproduction, which isn't happening. You know, so what I'm studying now is I'm looking at competition. That's aggravating. Did it again. I got to figure that out. So Dave Weber just came in on the conversation, looks like. How do the crappie heads help with aging? What they'll do is they'll pull the ear bones out of the head. And I knew that Mark Cornwell's got a diamond blade where he can cut through the otolith, which is the ear bone. There's two ear bones in the middle of the head of every fish. And they can extract those otoliths, cut them with a diamond cutter, and then look under a scope and count the rings. So each year that a fish ages, it adds a ring of calcium into that ear bone. So they're going to take the heads, extract the ear bones, slice them real thin, and then they can figure out exactly how old the fish are. And then what's going to be fun for the students that Mark wants to do is he wants them to take scales off these fish, see if they can age them with the scales and compare that to the otoliths for each fish and see how close they can get. So he's going to turn it into a pretty fun exercise for fishery students. Okay, let me see here. I'm going to go back down here because I saw some things pop up. Okay, here, let me see. Wahib Zar, that's a new person. Yeah, frozen for 8 minutes, Frank. Really, that's aggravating. I wish I knew how to beat that, but I don't. James McCoy, Ricky Vogel, let's see. Dave Weber, okay. Wesley Ellis, about finished building my new house that sits about 100 feet from my 1 acre pond. I was thinking about piping the gutters to empty into the pond. Yeah, that's a great idea. Should I wait till I get an aeration system? No. So the pond, no. Water coming off the gutters is not going to make a 1 acre pond turn over. Go ahead and do it. Do it while you're building. That's the time to do it. Knock it out. James Allen, can you age fish? We're going to find that out. You know, I think you can, with aging with scales, because what you do there is you take a scale and put a little bit of betadine on it, diluted betadine, just to dye it so it's not clear. Then you squeeze it between two slides and then look at it with a microscope and see if you can count the rings. So what Mark's going to do is see how effective that is, because if they can look at scales and be accurate, then I can tell these landowners, hey, you can look at scales and be accurate. So while they're in the boat, they can age crappie if they want to. So let's see what else was in that question. How does length and weight factor into their age? That is that's a great question. That's totally dependent on that environment. So it's if those fish have had all the food they need to get to that size, they did it in a short time. If it's stretched out over a period of 5 or 6 years, so in other words, if we're looking at these crappie and we're seeing crappie that are 3 years old and crappie that are 6 years old, there's significance to that. There's significance to that because one of the goals is they want to grow some 2.5 pound crappie. Well, if they don't have enough food because they're overcrowded and underfed and they're 6 years old and they weigh 1.25 pounds, then we can begin to identify that issue. But if we've got some 6-year-old crappie and then the next size class is 3 years old, then we know we missed 2 age classes between that. So there are 2 spawns that were missed, and there's spawns that were missed after those 3-year-olds. So that tells us something there that once a year, if they don't have reproduction, then they need to go to the fish hatchery and buy about 10 or 12 crappie per acre and put them in there, when they're like 4 or 5 inches long, and replenish, so they can have a constant supply of young fish coming up through the pipe because they're only going to live so long. So that's about how I'm going to answer that one. Let's see. Who the heck figured out that you can age a fish by the rings in an ear bone? Billy Bates, I know you didn't do it. I don't know who did that, but it's pretty dadgum smart. I don't know. Somebody way smarter than both of us figured it out because I didn't. Okay, Dave Weber, interesting like cementum annual. Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, kind of like that. Philip Chamley, good to see you. Jeff Cox, James Allen. Would like to see more. Yeah, I would too. I tell you, here's what we're going to do. I talked to him for about 20 minutes today, and what he's going to do is he's going to turn that into a 4 or 5 part series for Pond Boss. So as he does the aging, he's going to create these timelines and some graphs that lets us see how those fish fit in. And we're going to compare lengths and weights to age and see if we can see trends. And when we can see that, then we can start making better advice or giving better advice on how to manage that crappie population. Also, did the students correlate the electrofishing boat with the angled? Yes, they did. Yeah, they did. They did. Now, they also saw the bias of both because they were in that boat, crystal clear water, pedal down, and they could see bass running from them, which is what bass do. I mean, when you got a boat coming at you with an outboard motor and a generator vibrating in the water, making noise, they want to run from you. So they got to see how that worked. And actually, the anglers caught more fish than the electrofishing boat did because there were probably 7 or 8 anglers all the time reeling in those bass. So they weighed and measured the bass and correlated that with the fish that were caught with the electrofishing boat. They were exactly the same. Same trends, same lengths, same weights, exactly the same, except there were more of them. Okay. See here, Frank James, my purine store hasn't gotten MVP or Aquamax shipment for nearly a month. Is there an issue with manufacturing? I don't know of an issue with manufacturing. I don't. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on. Matter of fact, I'm going to be there. I'm going to go shock their lake on the 8th, which is next week. So I'll ask them. I don't know. It's pretty frustrating to hear that question. Great feed. Let's don't make it. So I don't know the answer. I really don't, but I'll find out. And I don't know why they haven't gotten it. I tell you what, I can call Bob Wisher. He'll tell me. He knows. Will crappie feed train? Troy Todd asked. No, they won't. Now, I tell you what, you can't buy feed train crappie from a fish hatchery. I know that. But I know that Bruce Condello has feed trained his crappie, but he's done it in a tedious way every day, day in, day out, where he kind of Pavlov dogs them by starting them off on live food. And then once he gets them conditioned to that live food, which actually all of his predators come to his dock. He's got smallmouth bass, he's got crappie, he's got largemouth bass. And what he does is he conditions them with live small bluegills or live shiners or whatever he's got. And then once they're coming and they're conditioned to that, then he starts getting his coal fish. Like he'll cull bass out of that lake, like these 14 inchers you guys were asking about a while ago, and he'll fillet those and chop the fillets up in little bite sizes and drop them over where they'll flutter in the water, and over a period of time, they're coming to that meat, and he's got them feeding. But he can't throw a fish food pellet out there and watch a crappie eat it. That ain't gonna happen. Don't do it. Jeremy Duckworth, good to see you. Gary Oborn, Josiah, good to see Josiah from Missouri. Let's see here, Josiah's got more. Okay, let me see. What are your thoughts on raising shiners in small ponds about 4 feet deep, and then adding them to a bigger pond for the bass? Will the shiners do all right in the heat of the summer and 4 feet of water? Yes, they will. I think that's a great idea. And in today's world, today's marketplace, I got word today that no fathead minnows will be available in the southern fish hatcheries until the fall. None. Sold out, gone. I don't get it. I don't know if it's COVID related. I don't know if it's staffing related, or if it's just feed related, or just supply and demand. My gut is that it's pretty good supply and demand. Okay, Billy Bates, Bob, we hear about all types of hybrids, but I never hear about a northern strain by coppernose. Those are very common. People just don't talk about them. Seems like that would be marketed just like the tiger bass for us bluegill lovers. I don't think anybody's really cracked that nut. And most of the hybridization has happened accidentally, where we've got these coppernose bluegill and a few northerns got in there with them, so now we have hybrids. So I don't know. I don't know of any of the bigger fish hatcheries that would see the value in that. And I think that bluegill, genetically speaking, are more of a stepchild than largemouth bass are. One of the things I tell people is to use local sources of bluegill if you can. Because if you're trying to stock bluegills and you live in Maryland and you can only get them from Arkansas, I don't know if they're going to do that well. But if you got a hatchery up there in the Northeast, up in New England somewhere, well, there won't be any bluegill hatcheries in New England. They don't like them up there. But somewhere in the Carolinas, Virginia, through there somewhere, all the way up the Atlantic seaboard, if there's hatcheries up there that raise bluegill, I'd get them. And there's a hatchery outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, and he raises some and he brings some in from Arkansas, Jones Fish Hatchery. So, I don't think the industry is matured enough yet where people would have any kind of demand for a provable intergrade cross between northerns and coppernose bluegills. But I see them all the time. You can look at them and tell. They have the traits of both fish. They might have a copper nose and a blue tail, rather than the copper-colored tail. So I see those. I see those all the time, especially in Texas and Arkansas. I see them all the time. Let's see here. Okay, Kevin, they all come to feed at my pond at 7:30 every night. That's because you do it 7:30 every night. That's good. That's the way to make them consistent. Daniel Powell from the North Cackalack, South Cackalack line. Long time since I've been able to join live. Good, I'm glad you're here, Daniel Powell. It's been a long time. I remember seeing you around months and years ago. Chris Sample, revitalizing my pond. Just recently had it dug deeper. I'm catching green sunfish and heard that I don't want them in my bass pond. Do you agree? Rather than me agree, here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to agree or disagree. I'm going to give you some facts. Green sunfish are protein. And if you got bass big enough to eat them, they will eat them. Green sunfish are going to spawn in that part of the country once a year. Bluegills, on the other hand, if you don't have bluegills, stock bluegills, because they're the backbone. When you're at the North Carolina, South Carolina line, you're going to be able to have 3 to 4 bluegill spawns all year through the course of a year. You'll have some in bluebird days in late winter, and then spring, early summer, and then a spawn in the fall. So you can have 3 or 4 spawns each year. So bluegill become the backbone of the food chain. And since green sunfish only spawn once, and your bass numbers start to get up, they're going to eat those green sunfish, and their numbers are going to plummet. Now, if you've got a pond that's overwhelmed with green sunfish and you're getting ready to stock bass fingerlings, don't stock bass fingerlings. Green sunfish will eat them. So I'm not anti-green sunfish. I do hate to waste them as protein, but I do think you have to have a strategy if you want to contend with them as your bluegill take over. So that's the way I'm going to answer that. It's like I'm running for office or something. Kevin, as I start to walk up to the pond, they start to splash at the dock. See, you just take your shirt off. You don't have to have a shower. Your fish will give you a shower. I love it when they do that. That's so much fun when your fish are so aggressive. You know what? I didn't do a commercial. I need to do that right quick. Hey, $35 a year. $35. Chris Sample, Texas here. Okay, good to see that. Cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. So, go to pondboss.com, click on subscribe, and if you haven't done that, join in. That's part of what fuels the economy where I can do this sort of thing. But so does Texas Hunter Feeders, Texas Hunter Products. They've got Texas Angler Products now where they're doing their fish habitat stuff. Texas Hunter Hunting Products. They've got the best fish food. I just washed my tongue. Can't do anything with it. So their feeders are outstanding, as is their customer service. So I highly recommend Texas Hunter Feeders. Purina Mills, if your feed dealer can get the feed. I love their fish food. I've grown some giant fish on their fish food, and I've helped them develop it indirectly. I mean, I'm not their nutritionist. They have nutritionists that do that work, but I get to help use the feed in real-world sources. I get to help grow some big fish with their feed, and I'm a believer in their feed. And I'm going to ask them if we got a manufacturing problem, because I don't know what's going on. I know that in the feed industry right now, it's just like everything else that's going on. Some of them are having supply chain issues. Wouldn't surprise me if Purina is having some supply chain issues. I don't know, but I'm going to find out, and I'll post something here when I get there next week to electrofish that lake. I want to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning on the 8th. We're going to shock 2 ponds. We're going to shock the lake that they renovated. And then Purina recently bought a tract of land adjacent to their farm downstream from their lake with a really nice lake on it, an 8 or 10 acre lake. We're going to go shock it and see what's going on there. James Allen's got his fish trained to follow him. He's like Peter Piper. No, is that Peter Piper? I don't know who it is. Somebody blows a pipe and the mouse follows them. Judy Jackson Sanders, hello there. Good to see you. So you know what? Rather than run the risk of another internet outage, I'm going to start wrapping it up because I need to make a couple of phone calls and see what I can do to start figuring out this Excel spreadsheet. I'm so glad you joined me tonight and missed you guys last Wednesday, but rest assured I was having a good time hanging out with the department head of Texas A&M's Range, Wildlife, and Fisheries Management Department and 19 students that helped inspire me and refreshed my thought process about our youth. So I'm tickled to death to be able to do that and go hang out and work on a crappie lake for the last couple of days. I got a big road trip coming up, headed to Missouri to go work on a lake near Drexel, Missouri that's in its 5th year or 4th year after stocking. That's going to be fun. Pied Piper, Fred Bingham is. I said Peter Piper. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, but Pied Piper, he's the one causing fish to walk around by the dock. So there you go. And I've been drinking Diet Dr. Pepper. Here we go, man. Yep. All right. So looks like we're going to wrap it up. Daniel Powell, is there any negatives with bucket stock crappie in a lake? Yep. Don't do it. Yeah. Don't ever bucket biology is never wise because you don't know enough about what fish you're getting to put in there. So you don't know if they're 7 years old and 3 inches long or if they're 2 years old and 10 inches long. You don't know if they're going to fit into that population. You don't know if you have enough food to feed them. So I think rather than, hey, there's some crappie available, I'm going to go dump them in my pond, don't do it. Learn about it and think about what you're going to do before you do something like that. So, hey, it's 7:25. I'm going to wrap it up, and good talking with you guys. Let's see, next Wednesday. Holy cow, where will I be? Today's the 1st, 7th, 8th. Oh, you know what? I'll be coming back. We headed back from Purina Mills, so I'll be in a hotel somewhere, and Chico's going to be with me. We're going to go video that. So until next week, I'm going to sign off, and I appreciate you guys watching, and we will see you next Wednesday. Adios.